This morning, the House passed in an amended version Senate Bill 528, and are sending back to us. That is a Climate Solutions Now Act. We will have our committee council go through those changes, and then it'll be up to the committee to decide how we proceed. So you are receiving a reprint with their amendments. Okay, Ms. Morton, who is very familiar with this bill, will walk through the changes that the House has made.
Okay, so the documents that just went around, the thick one is the reprint of the bill with the original Environment and Transportation Committee amendments. Additional amendments were adopted both from the Environment and Transportation Committee and from a couple of individual sponsors on the floor. That's the smaller amendment packet. There is no way to run a reprint with all of the amendments together, so I'm just going to have to kind of walk through what those ones do. But we'll start with the big packet. So again, this is the big packet. The amendment number at the top is 493028/1. And I'm just going to kind of take it in order. So the first changes appear on pages 9 and 10, as well as in later parts of the bill. But essentially what these parts do is they strike the language that would have required each jurisdiction to build one net zero energy school. So that is out of the bill. The Net Zero Energy Grant Fund is out of the bill. Pages 11 through 14, these add definitions of underserved and overburdened communities for purposes of the work that was to be undertaken by the Department of the Environment and the Sustainable Justice Commission, and also alters other provisions related to environmental justice. Jumping forward a bit, pages 22 through 24. Here, the House has struck the language related to landfill methane emissions monitoring and regulation. So all of that is out of the bill. Page 24. This moves the target year for achieving a statewide greenhouse gas reduction of 60% from, it was 2030 in the original Senate bill. They've moved it to 2031. Pages 26 through 28. They've made a couple of sort of minor changes and additions to the language related to greenhouse gas emissions reduction planning. So for example, they've added language saying that the plan can include the use of electric distribution and transmission infrastructure improvements, and must include policy recommendations to ensure the continued operation of Maryland's existing zero carbon emission electric generators through current operating licenses. Pages 28 through 33. The House has added 3 new working groups under the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. Those working groups are the Energy Industry Revitalization Working Group, the Energy Resiliency and Efficiency Working Group, and the Solar Photovoltaic Systems Recovery, Reuse, and Recycling Working Group. The next changes begin on page 37, as well as later in the bill. These add provisions from House Bill 88, the Electric Distribution Systems Planning and Required Labor Standards Bill. These provisions encourage electric companies to pursue federal funds to meet the state's policy goals for the electric distribution system, and requires the Public Service Commission and the Maryland Energy Administration to provide assistance and support to electric companies applying for and obtaining access to federal funds as specified. In addition, these provisions establish wage and labor requirements for contractors and subcontractors working on certain federally funded electric infrastructure projects. On pages 37 through 46, the House has struck provisions relating to the establishment of a Climate Justice Corps and has instead expanded the mission and purpose of the existing Chesapeake Conservation Corps to include climate justice projects and initiatives. The language regarding stipends for Corps members engaged in climate justice work, the coordination with the historically black colleges and universities, as well as the annual appropriation for climate mitigation and clean energy projects undertaken by Corps members is retained. Page 48, I'll note it briefly, but I will add that this is actually taken out by one of the floor amendments. Initially, the House had added electric-ready building requirements. But again, that comes out in one of the other amendments that we'll discuss. Page 50, they alter the energy savings requirements under the Maryland Empower program. It's a little bit, take it from 2.25 to 2.2% in 2022 through 2024. Ramping up to 2.5% per year in 2027 and thereafter. Also, starting on page 50, the House has added language from House Bill 696, establishing an electric school bus pilot program to allow electric companies to use the storage batteries of electric school buses to access stored electricity through vehicle-to-grid technology, in exchange for providing sort of funding mechanisms to school systems for the acquisition of electric school buses. In pages 52 through 54, the House strikes language that would have required the 100 state-funded capital projects to meet LEED net zero energy requirements. It also strikes the changes to the Maryland High Performance Building Program related to schools. Page 55, the House has modified provisions regarding electricity procurement for the state. To require the state to, and so that those provisions apply to no or low carbon energy sources. In the Senate bill, it had talked about low carbon renewable energy sources. Page 56 through 58, the House has extended the timeline for transitioning passenger cars in the state vehicle fleet to zero-emission vehicles. Page 62 through 67 alters the provisions of the bill dealing with building retrofits. So the major changes here, and some of this, again, because of how this is laid out, the definitions actually appear earlier on the bill, so that's page 36. But what they've done is they've increased the minimum size of covered buildings from 25,000 square feet to 35,000 square feet. That actually is on page 36. They've exempted manufacturing buildings from the standards, so that would be in addition to the standards that were already, or the exemptions that were already in the Senate bill for agricultural buildings and historic buildings and schools. They've altered the interim reduction goals that the performance standards are intended to meet from the Senate bill. It said 30% by 2035. They've altered that to 20% by 2030. they have struck language that would have required school buildings, which are exempt from the standards, to collect and submit benchmarking data. You might remember that was actually added through a floor amendment in the Senate. They have struck language that would have explicitly authorized local jurisdictions to adopt more stringent building energy performance standards. Next, on page 68, the House amendments alter the composition of the Building Energy Transition Implementation Task Force. And finally, pages 70 through 72, they've altered provisions related to the Public Service Commission report on electrification, and have delayed until 2030 the sunset on the requirement for the state to achieve net zero statewide greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Do you want to take questions on those, or do you want to move to the next ones? Okay.
There's a freestanding that says Environment and Transportation Committee. I think there were floor amendments.
Right. So the next packet on your desk, the slimmer packet, these are the floor amendments. So there's actually two sets of floor amendments from the Environment and Transportation Committee, as well as two individual sponsor amendments. So the first page, we have the floor amendments. This is number 173620/1. And so I'm just going to kind of go through these amendment by amendment. So amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 clarifies that the building emission performance standards apply to state-owned buildings. Amendment number 3 adds a definition of district energy for purpose of the building emissions performance standard provisions. Amendment number 4 adds a tenant's advocate to the Buildings Energy Transition Implementation Task Force. Amendment number 5 excludes energy used by a food services facility from the calculation of direct emissions for covered buildings under the Building Energy Performance Standards provisions. Amendment number 6 strikes language added in the original committee amendments requiring new buildings to meet electric-ready standards. Amendment number 7 adds language increasing the state share of eligible school construction costs for schools built as net zero buildings. So just to kind of recap, the original Environment and Transportation amendments had taken out sort of the grant program and the requirement for net zero buildings. This would sort of create an incentive for jurisdictions that choose to build a net zero energy building. They'd actually get a 5% increase on the state cost share. So the state would be picking up a greater proportion of the cost. Amendment number 8 strikes language, again added by the original committee amendments, making the purchase of zero-emission vehicles in the state fleet subject to the availability of funding. And amendment number 9 changes the reporting requirement, or the deadline for the Public Service Commission's report from June 30th, 2023 to September 30th, 2023, which is actually more in line with what was originally in the Senate bill. The next amendment in your packet, this is amendment number 483427/1, also from the Environment and Transportation Committee. This just makes technical changes to the electric school bus pilot program provisions. The next one is an amendment from Delegate Adams. This is amendment number 17312/1. The amendment adds the Secretary of Transportation or the Secretary's designee to the Just Transition Employment and Retraining Working Group under the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. And the last amendment from Delegate Kipke, this is amendment number 583527/1. The amendment requires the Department of the Environment to take into consideration the use of biofuels by covered buildings when developing the building emission performance standards.
Okay, I will have some comments to make, but I wanted to open up for questions for the committee counsel as to what she just covered.
It's like taking a sip of water from a fire hose.
Are there any questions for Ms. Morton? Well,
All just sort of speechless. It's, for me, I just will check. So there's first of all, there's a number of House bills that have just been put into this bill. Is that also some of what has happened? And so it's bills from Economic Matters and from ENT? All right, so I guess it would be helpful to know, like, where those, if there's any way you can let me know where they're, which bills they are and where they are. And then I also, let's see, on the, yeah, I guess I'll stop there. It's just, it's a lot. It just feels like it's all over the place. Oh, yeah, I was just curious about the changing of the wording from climate change to climate impacts. Is that a universal change that was made throughout the text? And what was the reason for that, given that this is about climate change? Is there any testimony, or did anybody ask that, or did the committee chairs or whoever?
I don't know.
Yeah.
The
okay.
So- reason for that change, but it is
so first of all,
largely
I
throughout.
would, want to reject those because it's just not how we talk about it. Yeah, I'll just start with those two.
So I can answer the question. So the bills, the provisions from other bills that have been added in. So page 37 of the reprint, and also it's a couple other places in the bill as well, but it's the provisions from House Bill 88. Page 50 of the reprint, it's adding language from House Bill 696. And then in one of the floor amendments, that 5% cost share increase is, it's a provision, it's not the entire bill, but it's a provision from House Bill 1290, which is actually, I think, an appropriations bill. So that's actually in one of the floor amendments, so that's in 173620/1. That second Environment and Transportation floor amendment.
Senator Riley.
I voted against the original bill, but I'm pissed. They've taken your bill and significantly changed it in a manner that was not intended by you or this committee. I guess my question is one of process. Do you want to make decisions about this today, or do we have a day to mull it over and pick and choose what we want to fight about with the other committee?
Well, Senator, the choice before us is to concur or not to concur. We
Wow.
can't pick and choose some amendments and send them back. So we are faced with a situation of concurring or not concurring. And if we not concur, we can suggest a conference committee.
Yeah.
And they can choose to set up a conference committee or not.
Right.
And
I just defer to your judgment.
And we also know that the date for a presentment to the governor, so if he in fact vetoes it, is rapidly approaching. So I guess I will speak to my concerns. As the bill came through, and even now, it sets a number of important strides forward. It sets a 60% reduction instead of 2030. It was 2031. They put in 2032 so we can meet in a happy medium of 2031. I'm not going to fight over that. It sets a full a net zero by 2045. It sets up a climate core, however, in a different fashion. It sets zero-emission buses with the federal money. It sets up a green bank. and it does set the intent to move towards full electrification, and it does set the retrofitting, which is very important. That means buildings are going to have to start, and building owners are going to have to start to reduce emissions. That's very important. We will be among the state leaders across the nation. But that being said, I've been extremely disappointed in the lack of communications. There's not been a face-to-face since the fall. I've made that request numbers of times to have a face-to-face, and it has not happened. And while the bill does less harm when they send it back than last year, the bill's been weakened. I want to be totally frank about that. The House has weakened it. They've capitulated to some special interests, and I'm not happy, particularly in 4 areas, and I want to illuminate that. We had said any building over 25,000 square feet, which we thought was a reasonable number, would be required to retrofit and reduce emissions. That was increased to 35,000 square feet. So that means there are going to be a whole lot fewer buildings that are going to have to retrofit. They removed the ability of a county to exceed the policies in the bill. Already Montgomery County is going down the path of an even more aggressive action because they think it's appropriate for their county. That language has been removed. We had many sections on school decarbonization. We set up money for jurisdictions to tap into that money to build net neutral schools like we visited in Howard County and Baltimore City. That has been removed. The floor amendment from Senator West about encouraging them to put solar, removed. Senator Rosenpep's amendment from the floor to do similar, removed. I've always believed that the state should lead by example and all public entities should lead by example. So that's another area of disappointment. I know the Chair of Appropriations put in some language for some extra IAC money, but I'm not sure it's going to be incentive enough to do what we need to do. Added to the bill was nuclear energy. And I've tried to steer clear of that debate because it's a hotly contested debate, and that discussion of cost and benefits is worth the discussion, but I wanted to avoid it. You know, I remember Chernobyl, and we almost had a new Chernobyl about a month ago in the Ukraine. And we were neutral on different types of energy sources. That is now in the bill in multiple forms. They've added utilities and other fossil fuel interests to work groups, basically to simply allow them to have another bite at the apple to protect their interests and their profits, and I don't get it. They create a new work group under the Climate Commission, and this will get you. This is just amazing. It's called the Energy Industry Revitalization Working Group. So it's for the fossil fuels, the oil distributors, and other people to take another chance and another study to say why they should be retained, when the whole point of this bill was to move towards clean energy and look to the 21st and 22nd century, not the 19th century. They removed high-performance standards for schools. They even slowed down the transformation of the state fleet by another year or two. What that means is when the state fleet, a car reaches its life cycle, we suggested 25% of them, that's all, 25% be replaced with zero emissions vehicles. They've pushed that back 2 years. And the marginal cost between a traditional gas engine and electric vehicle has come down significantly, but even that was too much for them to bear. So I'm frustrated. But we know we're in the last weeks of the last term, and if what the governor said 2 weeks ago when he said this is just an energy tax bill waiting to happen, and he tweeted about it when we debated on the floor, I would assume he's going to veto it, although I don't know that. So if he does, we want to be able to override that veto. So we are confronted with a difficult situation, and so am I. Do we concur with something that was weakened significantly by the House, who didn't show the backbone I would have hoped? Or do we not concur, set up a conference committee and see if we can do it in 48 hours or 36 hours? I normally am the first one to say, I'll play chicken with you. And I'm more than disappointed. In some degree, I'm outraged. But the question is, do we jeopardize a pretty significant step forward? I know a lot of the advocates have been working on this for years, say we got to move forward, we got to take it and come back next year. I would hope that's true. And there is a study to be done by the Public Service Commission. And we have language in the bill that says we have an intent to electrify in the future. So that's the challenge we have, committee, and that's why I wanted to bring it to you. I am inclined to concur, but I can also be convinced otherwise. Well, I want to be frank. I mean, this is, we've put in a lot of work. A lot of advocates have put in a lot of work. The question is how bold we want to, what steps we want to take to go forward. Again, it does have a green bank. It does have the climate core. It does have zero-emission buses. It does have a 60% reduction. And it does have retrofit for emissions, 20% by 2030. Very, very important. It's probably the most important piece of the bill. So I'm going to stop there before I say something I'll regret. So I'm going to open it up. I saw Senator Patterson would like to speak, followed by Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I got a mixed reaction here, but my concern is when will we stand up and flex our muscles, or do we continue just doing all this work and meeting over the summer, the interim, working together as a team, thinking that we have something going, and then at the 11th hour, we get some S like this. I mean, it's insulting. It's almost a laughingstock on the House versus the Senate. And, you know, at some point, you got to draw a line in the sand and take the hits, because if not, who's to say we won't be back here next year and the next year doing the same thing or similar type legislation? I mean, the work that April and others put into it, I mean, I would be almost crying inside. You know, it's totally insulting. And, you know, I'm willing to abide by your wishes in terms of where do we go from here, but it's not going to take away my personal feeling of how I think we've gotten kicked around.
Thank you, Senator. We'll go to Senator Washington, followed by the Vice Chair.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't say this lightly, but this feels very much like extortion. It feels as if what we know needs to happen in this state is being held hostage to pass some bills that probably aren't well funded. I mean, aren't well thought up. And again, just kind of to. Yeah, so it just feels very much like extortion. So I do very much, I don't appreciate bullies. I don't respond well to that. I really do appreciate that you are willing to take the high road in the greater good, so it is helping me, but my first reaction is very much somewhat in line of what the good Senator Patterson has said, that this type of behavior in terms of how we craft policy does not, I don't believe it's in the best interests of our state. And I'm sad to feel that we can't even contemplate going to a conference committee, which would be the opportunity. We go to conference committee, and then we could wrestle these out and come up with a better product. But I do share your concern that if a conference committee is not, if they don't agree to a conference committee, that we could lose the entire bill. So that is why I am careful when I use the words that it feels like extortion, that the 2-year process of developing true climate solutions has been hijacked. I am still thinking about how I would vote to concur, but I do or not, but I appreciate your wanting us to take the higher road and have faith that maybe in the years to come, we can do something to move this along. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with everything that Senator Patterson and Senator Washington both said. And I really want to just honor our chair for truly the incalculable number of hours he has invested in these issues. And it's for the future of our state, our nation, our planet, and for our kids, grandkids, and he understands these issues in this bill better than any of us are likely to ever do. The fact that we were exactly here a year ago is really frustrating, and I do have to own that my friend and district mate is one of the chairs in the other body, and I'm just super disappointed and frustrated. I also want to acknowledge that this is the end of a 4-year term, and I think this is one of those, perfect is the enemy of the good. I'm not even sure this is going to rise so much to the good, but it's the better than nothing. And so I tell my staff a lot of times, and that sometimes half a loaf or a slice of a loaf is better than no loaf. And so it breaks my heart because I think Maryland could really have been on the national forefront and really set the example with the bill as the Senate passed it. But as the chair pointed out, there are pieces of it that remain, pieces of it that are something, and even the pieces that got pushed back or watered down, those of us who may be back next term, or those of us who will be sitting in the seats if we're not, can take a new look, and we can have the opportunity when we're not facing a veto sword of Damocles over our head in terms of negotiation and conference committee. So for all of those reasons, and with the deepest respect for our chair and our leader, I would suggest reluctantly that we should move to concur.
Okay, I'm going to make a couple of very short comments. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, but we're not leaving the room, and then we'll come back and vote. Budget and Tax is awaiting. If we do concur, they have to concur too, and they're voting for about another 25 or 30 minutes, so we're going to have to send up Ms. Morton. Let me make 2 comments, and then I'm going to break for a 5-minute recess. This is a tightrope, ladies and gentlemen. We will be one of a fairly small number of states that by legislation call for a 60% reduction, which exceeds what the president has called for. We will be in the forefront of the states requiring retrofitting of at least 20% of buildings, although not as many buildings. So we make major steps forward, and we require a school bus to become electric if that federal money is allotted to our state. So it does make significant strides forward, but I agree that it slows down those strides, and they aren't as bold and aggressive and as long as the strides I think was in the original bill. So that being said, we're going to take a 5-minute recess, and we'll come back and vote on.
Just before you leave,
Please.
where is the president of the Senate on this issue? I mean, isn't this a reflection on us as a whole?
Somebody from his office is here. I don't know if he wants to respond to that or not.
Oh, oh my goodness.
I don't think he does.
Yeah,
Okay, during this 5-minute recess, we will make it informal. It's up to us. He is a representative from the Senate President's office, and we can have some very brief informal conversation. So with that, we're literally taking 5 minutes. Unless you have to go to the bathroom, do not leave this chamber, because we have to finish one way or the other, concurring or not concurring, and let Budget and Tax know in about 10 minutes. Okay, we're recessed for 5 minutes. We are reconvening a voting session of EHE after a brief recess. The floor is open to motions. I recognize Senator Washington. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I didn't know that was,
I said, therefore, reluctantly,
Oh, sorry.
I moved to concur.
okay,
There wasn't, you didn't ask for a second, but I did make the motion.
okay.
There, I can withdraw it.
Well, no, it doesn't, then let's go,
You didn't process that.
I take it
right?
as an intent. I didn't know that was a motion.
That was a motion. No, sorry.
Repeat it.
Yep. So at the end of my sad rant, I suggested reluctantly that we move to concur, and that was, so I'm making that as a more formal, clear motion now, that I move, Mr. Chairman, that we concur with the House.
Senator Washington?
I second the concurrence, and the concurrence is concurring with the concept that we must have climate solutions in the state of Maryland. So I second the concurrence.
Okay, the motion before you is concurrence with the House version. It's open for discussion, for debate. Well, I will support it. I think this is an important step forward. It is not the bold step forward that I had hoped. And as I said, those strides were greatly shortened by the short-sightedness in the House. It's not to the point of making this bill replaceable. It will put us in the top tier of the states. Able Foundation did a study earlier this winter saying Maryland was in the forefront of climate efforts to fight climate and fell back in the crowd. I think this will put us back in the forefront of those states taking aggressive actions. But I think the efforts to weaken it and give in to the special interests were woeful in the House. But in spite of all that, I will be voting in favor of the concurrence motion. So if there's no further discussion, we'll do a roll call.
Senator Kagan? Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Lamb? Senator Lamb, yes. Senator Hester? Senator Hester, yes. Senator Ellis? Senator Ellis, yes. Senator Carozza? Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Washington? Senator Riley? Senator Riley, yes. Senator Patterson? Senator Patterson, yes. And Senator Penske?
Yes.
Senator Penske, yes. It's 9-2.
9-0-2.
I'm sorry.
Okay, then Ms. Morton will be excused to go upstairs to Budget and Tax to share what we have done and the changes in the bill. And we will move on with the other voting list. Hopefully, we won't be here real late. So we will probably skip okay, we're going to move on to the voting list, number 34. We'll start with Ms. Goodman, HB 84.
So we're going to try and hold HB 84 because the House has some amendments, and we're going to let them take the lead on that bill first.
So we'll wait for the Senate bill,
Yes.
okay? Let's go to 136.
House Bill 136, Education, Public and Non-Public Schools Senior Actions Plan, Brindley's Act. If you recall, this was the cross-file to Senate Bill 299. This bill requires, beginning in the 2023-2024 school year, local boards of education to take specified steps regarding the health care needs of students with a seizure disorder, including requiring each public school to have at least 2 school personnel trained in seizure disorders as specified. Each public school must provide specified staff training every 2 years. The parent or guardian of a student diagnosed with a seizure disorder must collaborate with school personnel to create a seizure action plan and provide medication and authorization as specified. A non-public school may require trained personnel. The amendments in your packet, starting on page 2, essentially adopt the Senate version of the bill, save one small change that we didn't want to take up in the first place, so it's not a substantive matter, it was a technical drafting decision.
The motion is to conform it to the Senate bill with this one small amendment.
Correct.
Is there a motion to such an effect? Senator Riley? And it's been moved and seconded. Senator Patterson, discussion. Senator Lamb?
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Does the bill allow school nurses to administer these medications? Or other people who are trained with these, who have undergone the training plan as cited by the seizure action plan, are they permitted to actually administer these medications? Because it seems like the bill is mostly about, local school systems creating plans.
Correct. So if you look on page 6, which is the reprint of the bill as amended, what essentially happens is 2 school personnel are required to take the fuller training, and that at least one of those has to be a school nurse, a certified medication technician, or what's the other one? A certified nursing assistant. Another volunteer may step up if, for example, they don't have additional people to take that, though I think most public schools have at least one nurse assigned to it and an aide, and that aide is generally a certified nursing assistant or a certified medication technician. The person who would take this fuller training would have the opportunity to administer, but in an emergency situation.
So they would be able to administer,
Yes.
even if they're not a school nurse or nursing assistant or certified medical technician.
Right, either administer or assist with the self-administration of a seizure rescue medication. Yes.
I think in most instances where someone's in a seizure, it's probably difficult to self-administer if you're actively in a seizure. Are there, and it looks like there was a provision here, I guess, on line 25 of the reprint.
Right.
That,
If you look on page 6 of your packet,
Right, or page 2 of 5. That it eliminates kind of the oversight by the school nurse of the personnel that would otherwise be authorized.
well,
So-
if you look at the bottom where it says 2II, an individual designated by the school nurse or other school healthcare practitioner or volunteer may serve as one of the trained school personnel under paragraph 1. So it's not completely out of that, but it's not designated, so the school nurse doesn't get to do all of that.
But it says a volunteer may designate.
No, they
So-
may serve as one of the individuals who receive the expanded training. If they don't have all of the personnel in the schools, and not every school has a school nurse on staff all the time, and if, for example, the medication technician is out or not available, you have another person in the school that's trained to do this in this situation.
So the volunteer can administer?
After they have been trained, yes.
But only after they've been designated. So they have to do 2 things. They have to be trained and they have to be designated by the school nurse or another school health practitioner?
Senator, I think the way this works is you have to have someone designated in the school. First is the nurse or a certified nursing assistant or a volunteer, and then they get trained, a full training. I don't know if that's 1 hour, 2 hours, or 8 hours. They come back and do a modified training to the whole staff, So if it happens in your classroom in the hallway, you don't panic. You've got some basic ideas of what to do next. So I think that's primarily what this bill does. I think the administering of anti-seizure medication, I think in most cases, if a parent knows their child has seizure situation, they alert them ahead of time and have the medicine there. But if there's not a nurse who's actually in that building, who might be assigned to 2 or 3 schools, someone's got to be ready and prepared to respond. Is that a fair?
That's exactly right. The purpose of the bill was to expand the available personnel who can handle these situations, recognize when it's happening, and be able to assist the individual who's experiencing seizure symptoms.
So I guess my question's more technical regarding the actual language in paragraph Roman numeral 2, where, at least the way I'm reading it, it could be a volunteer, an individual designated by a volunteer may serve as one of the trained school personnel. That it says, or healthcare, or school health practitioner, or volunteer, right? So aren't those kind of adjectives describing the individual designated?
No, it says an individual designated by the school nurse or other school health practitioner or a volunteer may serve as one of the trained school personnel under this. So, for example, the nurse or the other health care practitioner in the school can say, this individual shall serve in this role, or in case no one can be designated, a volunteer can step up and receive the training.
Are there requirements as to how much training they have to do?
Well, that's what's being developed under paragraph 1B, B1. So if you look on page 7 of your packet, where it says subsection C, it says, beginning in 2023-2024, a public school shall require an individual trained under B to every 2 years. Oh, wait, sorry, that's not the one. It's D, on line 21 on that same page. The department and the Maryland Department of Health, in consultation with the Epilepsy Foundation of America and other interested stakeholders, shall develop school health services guidelines and training program for the school personnel under subsection of B of this section on the management of a student diagnosed with a seizure disorder. So that's the development of the training that those individuals would have to take.
Senators reviewing it, so the motion is to conform to the Senate with the one small amendment on page 4 of your packet. Is that right?
No, it's on page 10 of the packet. You don't see it because it wasn't included. It was a technical change that just got taken out.
Okay. Yeah. The motion is to concur, not to concur, to conform it to the Senate version.
Favorable as amended.
Favorable as amended. It's been moved, it's been seconded, discussion. Senator, you want to be recording the negative?
Yeah, I mean, I just have some concerns with how this language is, that it could designate a volunteer, that could, I'm just not sure how much training they may have undergone to be able to, administer medication. And, but,
To be trained, to train the staff.
No, it's training for several things. It's training, it's in-depth training to recognize the signs and symptoms, management of students with the seizure disorder, and the administration or the assistance in the administration of the medication, generally in emergencies. I mean, my mother's a school nurse, and she said, she's the one, and the aide in the health room, they're the ones who do all of the medication administration. Generally, this is, again, expansion of school personnel who are available in case of emergency situations when those trained personnel are not available.
And the bill calls for 2 people. And I think the preference is a school nurse or a certified nursing assistant, but if they don't have those, they can go work down the line to a volunteer who agrees to get trained. So, okay.
So all the volunteers would have to have had the training to be able to do this?
Yes.
Right.
And so if they didn't complete the training, they wouldn't be able to.
Correct. They don't
be
have the
designated.
authority. The rest of the school personnel that receives the abridged training, it's mostly recognition of what's happening to an individual who's experiencing it and how to get help. That's what that training is about. So there's two parts. That's what we talked about, bifurcating the training, so not every employee in the building had to receive this lengthy, in-depth training. It was so that more people recognized signs and symptoms, they knew how to get help, they knew who to call, but that there was more people in the building that were able to really assist the individual experiencing those symptoms instead of the school nurse, if the school nurse was not available, because as we know, they're not available in every building.
So you can have a volunteer train others, and that would be okay?
Well, the volunteer who took the in-depth training can give the abridged training in the recognizing signs and symptoms and how to call for help, yes. I mean, these are our
I guess
teachers.
I just have some concern about training the volunteers who then the volunteer can train others. That it just seems like a disconnect from, having someone clinical do the initial training and then training a volunteer who then can go train.
It doesn't say anyone clinical does the initial training. It just says that training is developed. It doesn't say who delivers that training.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious if there was precedent for this with like naloxone training or like an EpiPen. Like, can somebody who's trained to use those, who's not a clinician, administer those?
I think almost anybody can deliver an EpiPen. I mean, I don't know if there's any training required. I have to look back at the statute. I mean, there's provisions in law already that allow for schools to stock EpiPens and for emergency administration, but I'm not sure if there's any authority in here that has to be conferred on an individual before they administer that in an emergency situation. Let me check.
I mean, I think there's a difference between naloxone and some of these other anti-seizure medications. The side effects of naloxone are pretty benign if someone's not undergoing an opioid overdose. Nothing really happens. Versus, there are certainly side effects of these anti-seizure medications.
Yeah, there's obviously side effects, but if nobody can administer the seizure medication, isn't death a possible outcome?
Well, I mean, death is not always the outcome of seizures, right? So for the vast majority of folks, they may have sore muscles, they may have bit their tongue. Most people don't die of seizures unless you're maybe, operating a heavy piece of machinery or a vehicle of some sort. There are risks to these medications if they're administered improperly. Probably those risks would be greater than somebody actually dying of a seizure.
Did you have a?
So I'm looking at section 7-426.2 of the education article. It says each county board shall establish a policy for public schools within its jurisdiction to authorize a school nurse and other school personnel to administer auto-injectable epinephrine if available for a student who's determined or perceived to be in anaphylaxis. So yes, there are other provisions in law that allow others to administer other medications.
Thank you, because that was my question. And I just want to ask the senator, is it only the provision So training, one of the things that you can do, is administering medication. But my son has seizures, and he's had them since he's 12 years old, and he's at a Montessori school. He was at a Montessori school, and they actually trained his classmates to what to do, if he fell out. So these are 12 and 13 years, and over the course of his life, my son trains his friends about how to respond. And so, it is the case that individuals who are not certified are trained at least on their ability to. So are you opposing that? I mean, yeah, I'm just saying, it seems like we're just allowing people to be changed, to be trained, and training, a trainer of the trainee is something that people do. So you can train the trainer. I guess that's the word. So you can train the trainer, and then that allows for the dispersal of the information at a greater rate than if you just require that some designated person, that only a smaller set of people can do the training. So that's why I support this bill.
Yeah, and I would remind the group, we did pass this once, Senator Young, about a month ago. Further and final discussion, one more run here, Senator Lamb.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with training people, which, I think if the seizure action plan is really just to train people, I think what gives me pause is really the medication piece, that someone can administer this based on training that's not clear to me yet how in-depth or how intense it will be. And, if it was just to set up a training program to identify signs and symptoms, similar to some bills that we passed before when it comes to things like diabetes and whatnot, I think that's a little bit different than, just the administering of medications, which, I think for some to consider, EpiPens would be more akin to kind of first aid medications. These are a little bit different than either EpiPens or naloxone. They're just stronger medications that I think gives me some pause. So.
Senator Kagan? Aye. Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Lamb? Senator Lamb, abstention. Senator Hester? Yes. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Ellis? Yes. Senator Ellis, yes. Senator Carozza? Yes. Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Washington? Yes. Senator Washington, yes. Senator Riley? Yes. Senator Riley, yes. Senator Patterson? Yes. Senator Patterson, yes. And Senator Penske? Yes. Senator Penske, yes. So 8102.
Passes 8-1-2. Okay, let's go to 396.
Getting that zero mixed up.
House Bill 396, Montgomery County Planning Board, open meetings, video and audio streaming, and minutes. This bill requires the Montgomery County Planning Board to live stream video or audio of their open meetings, to maintain recordings of their meetings online, to prepare meetings after the meeting has concluded, to maintain the minutes online as well. The bill states that a technical failure doesn't affect the validity of any actions that the board takes during the meeting. And if the board cannot comply with live streaming requirements, the bill also authorizes a good faith effort approach through recording the meeting and posting it online. We do have local delegation letters from PG County and Montgomery County.
It's moved, seconded. Discussion. Anybody wish to be recorded in the negative? Seeing none, the bill passes 902. Next bill.
House Bill 448, State Board of Cosmetologists, licenses, supervision of apprentices. This bill increases from 1 to 2 the amount of apprentices that a licensed senior cosmetologist may supervise, and authorizes a limited licensee to supervise up to 2 apprentices who are training in that particular limited license category. So limited license categories include aesthetic services and hair services.
Discussion on 448. Anybody wish to be recorded in the negative? Seeing no hands, 448 will go to the floor. We're going to skip the next two bills. Ms. Morton is upstairs. Let's go to 807.
House Bill 807, real estate brokers, salespersons, and associate brokers, continuing education courses, verification of identity. This bill requires an instructor of a continuing education course through the Real Estate Commission for real estate brokers, salespersons, and associate brokers to verify the identity of that student for in-person and remote classes.
Is there a motion? Okay. 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 So it's been moved and seconded for favorable for 807. Discussion, seeing none, it will go to the floor 902. Now we'll go to 523.
Senate Bill 523, occupations and professions, licenses, certificates, and registration immigrants. This bill prohibits a state occupational or professional board from denying either certifications, licenses, or registrations to immigrants, so long as the applicant meets educational, training, or professional requirements for licensure. Included in your voting packet is one sponsor amendment, and alongside that, outside of the voting packet, is an additional sponsor amendment. So the sponsor amendment included in the packet limits the bill to only include health occupations. So the prohibition on denial would not apply to professional classifications or licensing applications through the Department of Labor. It would only be those 26 or so through the Department of Health. And then the amendments that are outside the packet, which at the top end in 653, 728, deal with an issue within the Child Support Administration that requires Social Security numbers to be included on all licensing board for all of the licensing departments and agencies. So the amendments would authorize the acceptance of either a Social Security number or an ITIN, so an individual tax ID number for all licensing boards, professional, business, and health, instead of only requiring that SSN. So one narrows it to health occupations, the other broad for all licensing entities and allows an additional identity verification instead of a Social Security number. Senator Kagan, yes, sponsored the bill, sponsored both amendments. I can hand a copy to you, Senator.
Move favorable, and I'd like to explain it a little more if there's a second and it's on the floor. Senator Washington.
The other one is in the packet.
Okay. So colleagues, first I just want to thank Ms. Foxworth for working on the amendments, and just all three of our legal counsels do such great work for us. I'm going to describe both briefly, but I'm going to suggest that we look at one. So this is about folks who are here and who are not yet citizens. We have given them in-state tuition. We have given them free community college. We have given them legislative scholarships. And then when it's time for them to start their careers and get a job, we slam the door in their faces. There are 14 other states that have taken the federal government's invitation to modify their state laws so that these folks can get jobs, start their careers, live here, pay taxes here, and flourish here. The two things that Ms. Foxworth described very well, one was just to change the application to say, put your Social Security number or your ITIN number, which is what folks who are not yet citizens have. And the other is to narrow it just simply to health occupations. And so while I like the former, I'm going to suggest that we stick with just health occupations. That's where the crisis is. And in it feels like every hearing, every day, every news story, we hear about people not having sufficient access to healthcare workers, to nurses, nurse practitioners, home health care aides. the Maryland Hospital Association, the MedChi, our state doctors, our nurses, our health facilities folks are all strongly in favor of this. I suspect that you've heard from them in the last weeks and certainly within the last days. And so my recommendation is to narrow this, again, just to the version that will have this as a 5-line bill that says, a health occupations board may not deny a license, certification, or registration to an immigrant if the individual otherwise meets all educational training or professional requirements for licensure, certification, or registration. And that will allow people to provide health care in Maryland. So I move this amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the first amendment is to narrow it to health occupations only, not to every license in the state. That's on the floor before us. You want to speak to it? Yep.
Thank you very much. My question, Senator Kagan, is how does this apply to people who've legally applied for student visas who are not allowed to work here? It's my impression that a student visa restricts somebody from having a job.
So, again, if we allow them to apply for jobs, apply for licensure, not based on their immigration status or their citizenship status, presumably that would include the folks that you're referencing.
But wouldn't they be getting in trouble with the feds?
No, thank you for the question. The federal government specifically allows state government laws to reflect the reality that that we have 50 different states' opinions on this. 14 states have already changed their laws to allow people to apply for and get licenses, even if they're not yet citizens.
Okay, thank you.
And this would be the very narrow, just in healthcare fields.
Okay, the amendment before us is to narrow it from all licenses to healthcare. Senator.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, for this bill. I remember a debate, I think from last year, on the relief bill. We talked about the individual taxpayer identification number. So those people who have that number, they're not in the shadows. They are known by the federal government. That's why they apply for this number. And they receive this identification number. And during the debate on the floor, I basically informed folks what it is. If you do a Google search, it'll tell you that a ITIN number, or individual taxpayer identification number, is a tax processor number only available for certain non-resident and resident aliens, their spouses, and dependents who cannot get a Social Security number. It's a 9-digit number beginning with the number 9, and of course, it comes from the IRS. So these are people who are in the system, they understand what the rules are, and they get this identification number from the federal government, IRS. And last year, we gave them a tax break, so.
True.
So
All
thank you.
that.
On the amendment to narrow it to health occupations, any objection to narrowing the scope of the effect of the bill? Seeing none, that's adopted. Second amendment is adding ITIN number or social security number. Any objection to adopting that amendment? Seeing none, it's adopted. The bill as amended is before us. Discussion on the bill as amended.
I'll just, if I can note,
Please.
that with the I-10 one that we just adopted, with the I-10 amendment that we just adopted, since that's more expansive and we just adopted the health occupations one, we want to adopt an additional amendment that pares down that I-10 authorization so that it only applies to HealthOx as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
That's the plan.
Consider that a technical.
yeah,
Yes.
that's the plan.
Yes. They will go in tandem together. Yes. Let's do a roll call.
Senator Kagan?
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Lamb? Senator Lamb, yes. Senator Hester? Senator Hester abstain. Senator Ellis?
Yes.
Senator Ellis, yes. Senator Carozza?
No.
Senator Carozza, no. Senator Washington?
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Riley?
No.
Senator Riley, no. Senator Patterson? Yes. Senator Patterson, yes. And Senator Penske?
Yes.
Senator Penske, yes. 6-2-1-2.
The vote is 6-2-1-2, 6 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstaining, and 2 absent. Okay, we have 2 more to go. Let's go back to 649.
All right. House Bill 649, Environment, Discharge Permits, Inspections, and Administrative Continuations. This is the cross-file of Senate Bill 492. The bills is in a pretty similar posture to Senate Bill 492 as it passed the Senate. However, the House made a couple of changes. First, they added language requiring the Department of the Environment to notify each senator and delegate when of any facilities in their jurisdictions that are found to be in significant noncompliance under the bill. They also made sort of a technical change to the language regarding minor and major facilities. They just sort of put the regulatory definition into the bill. There is an amendment being offered to the House bill, which you will see. The amendment is on page 11, but the reprint starts on page 12. This amendment, it goes to that notification language that I was referencing. So if you look on page 16 of the voting packet, the House amendment had said the department must notify the senator and delegate representing the jurisdiction in which the permit holder is in significant noncompliance by email and certified mail. This strikes that and instead says the department shall maintain on its website a list of permit holders determined to be in significant noncompliance, and that the list shall be sorted by county, and that the department shall provide each senator and delegate a link to the list by monthly email.
Okay, so essentially it amends out that language that they added, which calls for mail and hard copy mail and soft copy mail with something a lot more efficient and simpler. Well, is that the only amendment? Are we accepting it? Okay. So I am suggesting we amend the House bill with this amendment. Everything else will stay the same as the cross-file, which we passed, which was the chairman's bill about a month ago. Any objection to adopting the amendment under the House bill and making it favorable? No objection? Okay, then 649 with the amendment will go to the House floor.
Not the House. Okay. You don't want to vote the bill separately? I'm not sure if the bill was unanimous in this committee initially. Oh, it was? Okay.
I'm not sure. I think it was.
I think it was. Hold on one second. It was unanimous.
Okay.
Great.
It passed unanimous the first time, so this time it'll be 902, 2 absent. Okay, and final, I believe the final bill today, 716.
Right, and this was on our voting list yesterday, but I failed to note that there was actually one other difference between the House and the Senate bills. So just wanted to come back and be clear about that. So I've actually included a copy of the Senate bill beginning on page 18 of the voting packet. So again, this is Patuxent River Commission membership. Yesterday, this committee had voted to adopt the amendment adding the representative of an organization or local government engaged in watershed management and restoration to the commission, as was done in the Senate bill. But the other difference between the Senate bill and the House bill is that the Senate had, this committee had amended the Senate bill to make it an emergency measure. So just wanted to clarify whether we want to do that with this bill as well.
Yes. So the motion is to, in fact, conform it to the Senate version, which made it emergency. There's a second. Any objection to including that amendment? And I want to point, so the bill is amended. We adopted one amendment yesterday. We're conforming with the emergency amendment today. Any objection? Seeing none, that's 9-0. And I want to point out, and I think this reflects on all of our committee councils, Ms. Morton missed something, making an emergency, which was the attitude of our committee, but she didn't want it to go till she checked to make clear that there's the full transparency. And I think all three of our councils are very careful and clear in making sure we have the right information. So I want to thank all of them. So that bill is passed and goes to the floor. That's our list for today. I thought we'd have a later night. I don't know our schedule for tomorrow. I don't know how long our evening session is going to be. If it's a short session and there's time, we may meet for an hour to allow Senator Hester to walk through her amendments. Now, just so we know, in the last 24 hours, I've gotten amendments from multiple places. Senator Hester has been working on this, and I told her if we had the time before Friday, we'd try to get started. So I think our morning session shouldn't be as bad. I don't think. We have bill hearings tomorrow. What's our topic tomorrow?
Environment, there's fewer bills.
Okay, so it might not be bad tomorrow. So we actually might start that process after the bill hearings and before we go back in the evening. But there are going to be two sessions tomorrow because of the presentment and some other issues. I don't want it to be a late night tomorrow, but if we can squeeze out an hour, hour and a half, it'll make life easier for Friday. I have been in contact with Senator Simon Ayer. He will be back with us on Thursday. So he will be able to join us at the social engagement in the evening. And I want to thank all of you for your input in the climate, whether you voted for it or not. I felt last year we went through a very long, arduous process that many people were engaged in, whether they voted for it or not, and had a very clear understanding of it. And I think they had even more of that this year. So I appreciate all of your support and all the time the committee put into it. My name's on it, but it came from a lot of advocates, a lot of scientists, a lot of experts, and of course from you. So I want to thank you for that. With that, we're adjourned.